They're still out there, right now, watching. For 20 years, Cindy's house sat peacefully in the foothills of Virginia's Blue Ridge Mountains. 20 years of silence. 20 years of nothing unusual. Then, in 2015, everything changed. And once it started, it never stopped. What began with mysterious knocking in the woods escalated into something far more terrifying. Something hit her second-story balcony so hard it shook the entire room, 14 feet off the ground. Something mimicked an owl but failed when its voice cracked. Something sat just 8 feet from her balcony, covered in hair, watching her in the darkness. And when she finally saw them, 2 of them, sitting there in the beam of her flashlight, she captured it on camera. Tonight, I'm going to tell you Cindy's story. A story of ongoing habituation by creatures that shouldn't exist. A story that hasn't ended. Because unlike most Bigfoot encounters that happen once and fade into memory, this has been happening for years. Every night, between 1 and 3 in the morning. Always the same time window. Always the same patterns. This is the account of a woman living alone in the Blue Ridge Mountains, systematically stalked by something that knows her routine, tests her boundaries, and refuses to leave. Her name is Cindy, and she's terrified to go outside after dark. For most of their marriage, Cindy and her husband were rarely home. He's a professor and speaker who does work for the State Department, traveling 9 to 10 months of the year. Their beautiful house in the Blue Ridge foothills of Virginia was more like a vacation spot than a home, somewhere they'd return to occasionally between trips. But in 2015, everything changed. They settled down. Her husband continued traveling, but Cindy stayed home. Alone. 98% of the time. That's when she started hearing the noises. The master bedroom has a balcony that faces directly into the woods, at least 14 feet off the ground. At night, Cindy would open the door and leave just the screen closed so she could hear the frogs, the crickets, the peaceful sounds of the forest. The area is teeming with wildlife, foxes, coyotes, occasional bears, and massive herds of deer. At least 30 deer regularly slept in the woods next to her house. After years of traveling, Cindy was settling into her home for the first time in decades, learning the sounds of the night, the rhythms of the forest. At first, the noises seemed normal, natural, wildlife going about their business under the cover of darkness. Then came the knocking. Not the hollow tap of a woodpecker, not the crack of falling branches. This was deliberate, rhythmic, intentional knocking echoing through the trees, as if something was striking wood against wood in a pattern. Cindy tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was deer rubbing antlers against trees. Maybe it was branches falling. But the pattern was too consistent, too purposeful. And it always happened at night. Always between 1 and 3 in the morning. One night, around 1 a.m., Cindy heard something moving through the woods. It sounded massive, like a bulldozer crashing through the underbrush. The noise was so loud, so powerful, that she got up from bed to investigate. Just as she stood, something hit the balcony. The impact was so violent, it shook the entire room. The wrought iron balcony rang like a bell, reverberating through the walls. Cindy's heart seized in her chest. She grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and rushed to the balcony door. Nothing. The woods were silent, still, empty. Whatever had hit the balcony with enough force to shake a room had disappeared in mere seconds. There was no sound of retreat, no crashing through the brush. Just gone. This became a regular occurrence. something would strike the balcony with tremendous force, and Cindy would run out with her flashlight, only to find nothing there, every single time. The pattern repeated night after night, always between 1 and 3 in the morning. She started keeping the flashlight right next to her on the bed, hoping to catch whoever, or whatever, was doing this. She needed to be faster. She needed to see what was out there. Then, at 3 a.m. one night, she heard the scream. Cindy had gotten up to let her elderly dog out. He was aging and needed frequent bathroom breaks, even in the middle of the night. She stood in the yard with him, the cool mountain air on her face, when a sound erupted from across the street that made her blood freeze. It started low, impossibly low, like it came from deep within the earth itself. Then it climbed higher and higher, transforming into a shriek that sounded like the gates of hell had opened. The sound was guttural, primal, filled with a rage or anguish that didn't belong to any animal Cindy knew. She grabbed her dog mid-urination and ran inside, slamming and locking the door behind her. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might explode. Her hands shook. She couldn't calm down. That sound had reached inside her chest and squeezed her heart with an icy fist. That night, terrified and desperate for answers, Cindy turned to the internet. She searched for explanations. Mountain lions? Number? Bears? Not even close. Coyotes? Nothing matched. Then she found it. BIGFOOT vocalizations, Sasquatch encounters, reports from all over North America describing the exact same sound she'd just heard. But that was impossible. Ridiculous. This was Virginia, not the Pacific Northwest. And Sasquatch was just folklore, wasn't it? Cindy remained skeptical. There had to be another explanation. Something logical. Something real. The next day, Cindy visited her neighbors to see if they'd heard the horrific scream. They said no. But then they shared something equally disturbing. A few days earlier, they'd been sitting on their deck when they heard something growling low in the woods. Her friend got up to investigate and saw eyes, large, reflective eyes, staring back at her from the darkness. The eyes were too high off the ground to be a deer, too widely spaced to be a fox or coyote. They'd gone inside immediately, sufficiently scared. As Cindy stood in her neighbor's yard processing this information, another woman from the subdivision walked by. She stopped and said something that sent chills down Cindy's spine. This is going to sound strange, but if you've heard weird noises in the woods, I heard them too. Cindy wasn't alone. Others had experienced it. Whatever was out there, it wasn't targeting just her. It was in the entire area. But for Cindy, the activity intensified. The balcony hits continued. The house itself started getting struck. Loud, powerful blows against the walls. The garage door would rattle from impacts. All of this centered around her bedroom, as if something was specifically trying to get her attention. When she'd take her dog out at night, the moment her foot touched the front porch, there would be a knock from the other side of the driveway. Immediate, responsive, as if something was watching, waiting for her to emerge, then announcing its presence. One night, while outside with her dog, Cindy heard an owl. But something was wrong. The calls were too loud, too erratic, making all kinds of noise that didn't match normal owl behavior. Then it messed up. Its voice cracked, breaking like someone had slipped out of character. Cindy started walking toward the sound. It was coming from the tree line on the other side of her driveway. She stopped with her car between her and whatever was making the noise. Smart thinking. She pulled out her phone and took a picture. When the flash fired, she saw the outline of something in the split second of illumination. Hands, a head, the silhouette of a figure standing there, The strangest part? She could see the outline clearly, but no details, except that the hands and feet appeared lighter in color than the body, like they weren't covered in the same dark hair. Her husband was home that night. He heard it too, but he couldn't explain it either. They both knew it wasn't a typical owl. Cindy heard owls all the time. This was different. This was something mimicking an owl and failing. The strange activity continued to escalate. One night, Cindy's dog went crazy, leading her to the other side of the house near the garage. He took her to the outside door leading to the deck. They both went outside, and Cindy leaned on the railing, looking around in the darkness. Then something huffed at her. It was a combination of a huff and a growl, a warning sound, aggressive and close. Cindy froze, her breath caught in her throat. She stood there in disbelief, processing what she'd just heard. Then, to her left, a tree branch snapped off, really high up in the tree, and crashed to the ground. The break was clean and loud. Her dog didn't make a sound. Both of them simply turned and went back inside. Cindy locked the door and prayed nothing would bother her that night. After they lost their elderly dog, Cindy and her husband got a new puppy. One day, while standing in the driveway, the puppy suddenly took off through the woods. He was impulsive and still learning to listen. Cindy chased after him through their 4 wooded acres, finally catching up and bringing him back. She didn't return the same way she'd gone in. She came back to the house at a different angle. And that's when she saw them. Tracks everywhere. Massive footprints covering the area she'd just walked through. Cindy went and got casting material. She made casts of several prints, documenting what she'd found. The footprints were enormous, clearly humanoid, but far larger than any human foot. By this point, Cindy was exhausted, frightened, frustrated. She'd been dealing with this nightly terror for months, maybe years. Sleep deprivation was taking its toll. One night, when the balcony got hit again, she lost it. She went out on the balcony, crying, and screamed at them. "You're scaring me. Stop it. Please. Just stop." Everything went quiet, completely, utterly silent. And after that night, the balcony was never hit again. But something else started. Gunshots behind her house. During that same 1 to 3 a.m. time window, multiple times a week, Cindy would hear shooting in the woods behind her property. Was someone else out there, dealing with the same thing? Were they trying to scare the creatures away? Or was it something else entirely? A few days after the shooting started, Cindy took her dog for a walk on the property. That's when she noticed it. A strange tree structure near the woods. Branches and logs arranged in a deliberate pattern. Not random, not natural. Constructed. Tree structures are one of the most documented signs of Sasquatch activity. Researchers across North America have found these formations in areas with frequent Bigfoot sightings. Trees broken at impossible heights, branches woven together, X patterns, and teepee-like structures that serve as territorial markers or communication signs. Cindy had found one on her own property. They weren't just passing through. They were living here. This was their territory. But the most terrifying encounter was yet to come. Not long after finding the tree structure, Cindy was on her balcony watching the flying squirrels. They came to her bird feeder at night, and on this particular evening, they'd brought their babies. Cindy wanted to video them for her traveling husband, but she needed better light. She grabbed her flashlight and stepped out onto the balcony to position it for indirect lighting. The squirrels had climbed up to the window above her. She pointed the flashlight down at the ground to find the best angle, and the beam hit two things sitting there, watching her. They were covered in hair, massive, maybe 8 to 10 feet from the balcony. One was in clear view. The other was partially visible off to its side. For a few frozen seconds, Cindy stared at them, and they stared back. Then terror took over. She bolted inside, and as she did, she heard them take off, crashing through the woods, much like she'd crashed through the door. Her finger had been on the camera button. She'd been trying to photograph the flying squirrels. In her panic and shock, she'd taken pictures without realizing it. When Cindy finally calmed down and checked her phone, there they were. Photographs. Actual photographs of the creatures that had been stalking her home for years. She's shown the photos to several people. They all say the same thing. I don't know what it is, but it isn't a bear. It isn't any animal I recognize. Cindy saw it clearly. It was covered in hair, on all fours, with wide shoulders and a slightly pointed head. It had turned away from her, so she didn't see its face, but she saw what looked like an arm. The proportions were all wrong for any known animal. She believes it was a juvenile, which means there are adults nearby. Bigger, stronger, more territorial. The Blue Ridge Mountains have a long history of Bigfoot encounters. Virginia has 87 documented sightings in the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization database. The region's vast wilderness, with old-growth forests that loggers couldn't access, provides the perfect habitat for an elusive species. In Virginia, Bigfoot encounters typically share common patterns: wood knocking, vocalizations, rock or object throwing, and habituation behavior near homes at the edge of wilderness areas. Cindy's experience fits this pattern perfectly. What makes her case particularly compelling is the systematic nature of the activity. This wasn't a random encounter. This was habituation, a term used in Bigfoot research to describe situations where Sasquatch repeatedly interact with a specific location or person over extended periods. Bigfoot is believed by many researchers to be primarily nocturnal, using the cover of darkness for both hunting and evasion. The creatures reportedly avoid human contact during daylight hours, emerging at night when they feel safer to move through their territory. The 1 to 3 a.m. time window is significant. This is when human activity is at its lowest, when most people are in their deepest sleep, when the forest belongs to the night hunters and the creatures that prefer darkness. But Cindy was awake during those hours, caring for her elderly dog, and something noticed. Something intelligent enough to recognize a pattern in her behavior. Something that tested boundaries, first with distant knocking, then closer impacts, then direct approaches to her home. The balcony hits were testing her response time. How fast could she get out there? How far would she go? When she started keeping the flashlight closer, ready to catch whatever was doing it, the strategy changed. When she finally broke down and screamed at them, begging them to stop scaring her, they listened. The balcony hits stopped completely. This shows intelligence, emotional recognition, the ability to modify behavior based on understanding that they were causing distress. But they didn't leave. They adjusted. They're still out there, still watching, still present in the woods around her home. Many people ask Cindy why she doesn't move, why she continues living in a house where she's too frightened to go outside after dark, where every night between 1 and 3 a.m. brings the possibility of another encounter, another scare, another reminder that she's not alone. The answer is complex. This is her home. She's lived here for 20 years. Her husband's work is here. Their life is here. And in truth, The creatures have never actually harmed her. They've tested boundaries, made noise, scared her terribly, but they haven't attacked. They haven't tried to break in. After she begged them to stop, they modified their behavior. Maybe that's the most unsettling part. The intelligence, the awareness, the fact that something out there in the woods is capable of understanding human emotion, responding to human requests, and choosing to either respect or push against the boundaries between our worlds. Cindy still lives in that house in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The activity has decreased since she confronted them, but it hasn't stopped. She still hears knocking in the woods. She still finds tree structures on her property. And sometimes, late at night, she feels eyes watching from the darkness beyond her porch light. The photograph she captured remains unexplained. Experts who've seen it can't identify the creatures. They only know what they're not. Not bears, not any known animal, not a hoax or pareidolia. Something was sitting there, 8 feet from her balcony, covered in hair, watching her in the darkness. Some researchers believe that Bigfoot wants to be left alone, that they take care of nature and the woods, and that humans should respect their space. Perhaps that's the lesson here. Perhaps Cindy's house sits in territory that was theirs first, and they're simply trying to coexist as best they can with this human who refuses to leave. Or perhaps something else is happening. Something we don't yet understand about intelligence, territory, and the thin boundary between our world and the wild places that still exist in America's mountains. Tonight, as Cindy prepares for bed in her Blue Ridge home, she'll check the locks. She'll keep her flashlight close. And between 1 and 3 in the morning, if you listen carefully, you might hear the same sounds she does. Knocking, echoing through the trees, footsteps circling the property, the occasional huff or growl from something that shouldn't exist but does. They're still out there. They're still watching. And they're not leaving. Sweet dreams.